Welcome everyone to Home Team's Smart Living Report, because there are so many things they just don't tell you. I'm your host, Ann Zeev with Keller Williams Success Realty and the Northern Utah Home Team. I'm so excited about today's guest. You're going to learn so much. I know that insurance can be boring or intimidating or overwhelming, but certainly not with today's guest, Brian Weller. We're going to talk about some of the real basics about insurance that no one ever took the time to explain to you, including why your insurance may be higher than your neighbor's. The goal, of course, is to put yourself into the position of not losing everything for something that may or may not even be your fault. So let me tell you a little bit about Brian. Brian has been working in insurance for almost 5 years. He's owned the Allstate agency for 2 years and opened a second office in Eden in April of this year. He's originally from Eden and has lived in Logan since he started school at Utah State University, where he and his wife live. He has over 3,000 clients from St. George to the top of Idaho and everywhere in between, and has the well-trained staff to help service everyone. He's a young business owner and has been successful because he's concerned with the well-being and protection of all his clients. So please welcome Brian Weller.
Thanks for the intro.
Well, you're welcome, Brian. Now, before we get started, I do have to remind everyone that we'll have a special offer just for our listeners at the end of the interview, so please stay tuned. So, Brian, what does your company do?
Well, surely if you've watched TV, you've seen all the commercials. You know, according to the injury lawyers, we collect money and then never pay out in any claims, right? Isn't that what all insurance companies do?
Well, we don't believe that, though, so we want you to give us the true scoop.
Well, in reality, you know, our job is to protect people. We protect people's assets. I mean, things people have worked really hard for their entire lives. So my agency's goal has always been to first educate people, let them know what they have and what it does, and then try to get them the best product for a reasonable price.
Okay, great. So most people think of insurance as a necessary evil. So I'm glad to hear you say that you educate people. So educate us in general. What's the main purpose or benefit of insurance?
Well, insurance is synonymous with protection, or risk management, it's often called. Basically, what you do is you pay an insurance company a premium, and they take the risk of certain things happening, like your house burning down, for instance, or you causing an auto accident. For example, you insure your home against fire and other risks because you've invested a large sum of money into that asset, and if something happened, you'd be out. Because it's insured, if something like a fire happens, the insurance company has agreed to take the risk of paying for the damages. When you get behind the wheel, any small mistake could cause literally thousands of dollars worth in damage. So you pay the insurance company to take that risk for you. And that's basically what it boils down to.
Okay, I see. So, Brian, please explain this, because I've never understood it. What determines the cost of the insurance?
I get that question all the time. Someone will call me or be in my office and they'll say something like, "Oh, my brother pays way less in insurance than I do," or "My neighbor and I were talking and he thinks I'm paying way too much." Honestly, the truth of it is, if I had a twin brother who was identical to me in every way, meaning that we lived in a very similar house, we drove the same cars, odds are that we'd be paying probably very different amounts in insurance. And of course, there's a lot of reasons behind that. The kinds of cars you drive obviously are a determining factor, the house you live in, but literally there are hundreds of factors that affect rates, and here are a few of the big ones.
Okay.
When insurance companies take you on, they look at your credit profile. The better credit you have, the less you're probably going to pay, because it's indicative that you're less risky.
Okay.
Your driving history is a big one. Obviously, if you have a history of getting into a wreck every year, odds are you're going to keep getting in wrecks, and the insurance company is going to have to pay more. Hence, you're going to pay more. And tickets come into that too. If you're a chronic speeder or you like to run stop signs, the odds are that one day that's going to catch up to you and you will have a major accident. Another one is who's driving. Are you a middle-aged person that doesn't have a lot of accidents, or are you 18 years old?
Right.
And only been licensed for 2 years or less? Those are very different. Even if you're driving the same car, it's a different level of risk.
Sure.
And of course, the last one is what kind of coverage do you have? Your neighbor that supposedly is paying less, he may not have full coverage on his 1992 Honda Civic, whereas you might have full coverage on your, large pickup truck. And of course, they're going to cost different. So, There's many more, but those are some of the big ones. Your credit profile, your driving history, your age, and what kind of coverage you have.
Okay, great. That makes sense. Hey, before I forget, let me tell everyone how to reach you, Brian.
Yeah.
Brian's phone number is 801-745-2428. And he can be reached on the web at www.brian, which is BRIAN, Weller, WELLER, allstate.com. And email is B for Brian, Weller, WELLER at allstate.com. So bweller at allstate.com. Okay, Brian, now I always tell my buyers to get an insurance quote after they have an offer accepted on a home so they can figure out their total monthly costs.
That's a great idea.
So do you provide free quotes, and how does a buyer get one?
Oh, absolutely. Having been through the home buying process myself, it can change things drastically. Right. How much is that escrow payment going to be?
Exactly.
It's always a good idea to get a free quote. We definitely provide them every day. It's pretty simple. Name, address of the home that we're going to insure, and then occupants of the home. So if it's you and a spouse, or if there's children over the age of 15 that are going to be living there, you want to list them on there, and we can get you a quote pretty fast. So yeah, it's really basic. Just give us a call or visit us online.
Okay, excellent. So I've seen so many times personally and with my clients that home claims never get paid out. What is and isn't covered, and why?
Actually, I bet you've seen a lot. Because, you've owned, was it 170 homes that you've owned personally?
Yep, we have.
Wow. So, aside from your customers and yourself, those two together, you've probably seen just about every type of calamity that could come.
Unfortunately, that's true. We've had experience with floods and fires, and a few more minor things.
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that homeowners insurance is not structured to handle everything under the sun that could possibly happen. If it was, the cost on it would be so outrageous that, literally only a handful of people would be able to afford it. So it isn't structured to handle everything. A lot of people make that mistake. They think that it is. One thing I always say is to check your declaration page. Whenever you buy an insurance policy, you get a declaration page that clearly states what is excluded from your policy. A few of the common ones that's almost always excluded are earthquake, flood, acts of terrorism, things like that. You can buy policies for those things for an additional cost, but they're very commonly excluded from a standard homeowner's policy. And a lot of people don't realize that. But you asked a question, you've had some incidents, some things that weren't covered, and I get people all the time asking why this or that wasn't covered. A very common one is water occurrences, especially ones that happen outside the home, like a sprinkler line or a water main, right? Well, those aren't actually attached to the structure. They're not part of the structure of the dwelling that's insured. And so anything that they cause is typically not covered by any homeowner's insurance policy. Again, you can find coverage for those things. It is rather expensive. But the best thing to do is to keep everything well maintained. That's another issue that people run into is they have something that happened, like a water tank or something starts leaking, a water pipe, and they don't notice it for months. And suddenly the drywall's soaking wet or the carpet's wet and they don't understand. Well, oftentimes, not always, it depends on a few things, but often those claims get denied because it's a maintenance issue. The biggest thing to remember in insurance, what it's structured to do, is it's structured to handle bigger things that are sudden and accidental. Sudden and accidental. So if it didn't happen suddenly, if it happened over time, it's probably going to be considered a maintenance issue. If it happened suddenly and it was accidental, now we're talking that's what the homeowner's policy is structured to handle.
Okay, sudden and accidental. Well, that finally makes some sense to me. So let me ask you this then. How often should I review my coverage and why?
Well, it's like going to the dentist. If you ask the dentist how often you should come on in, he's going to say come in weekly, right?
Right.
But in reality, they say go to the dentist every 6 months or so. I would agree. With insurance, it's like checking up on yourself. It's like having a professional take a look and make sure everything's where it needs to be so that we can prevent any large problems that could come down the road. At least yearly is what I would recommend. Meet with a licensed person yearly.
Okay, and when you get that renewal notice, that's probably a good
That's always a good indicator, yep.
Right. Okay, well, that makes sense. So I guess I've also been afraid to review it thinking that my costs might go up or my insurance agent might try to sell me something that I don't really need. So why do costs go up?
Well, addressing your question of will my insurance agent try to sell me something I don't need? I don't know. Everybody's different. Personally, I like to look for new discounts that are available because I realize, people don't want to overpay for insurance. And so by coming in and visiting with me, you might be able to save a little bit of money. There might be a new discount available. Maybe something's changed in your household. But like you said, costs do go up. And that's kind of a fact of life. In fact, I have a lot of customers who have been with our agency for 20, 30, even 50 years. They've been longtime customers of our company. And sometimes they say, when I bought this policy in 1979, it only cost me $150 a year. Why does it cost me $500 now? I don't understand it.
All right.
And I often just ask them, well, how much did you pay for bread in 1979? How much did you pay for gasoline?
Very true.
It's just like anything else. As costs go up, the end product cost goes up as well. Typically, and if you look, you can look through some statistics on it. It's very boring. I don't really recommend it unless you're very interested. But over the last 10 years, I've looked at some statistics of rising costs of insurance compared to rising costs of other commodities, and it's actually usually ahead of the mark. Cost of insurance hasn't gone up as much as a lot of other things. It's about par with inflation. So, in all honesty, because we do live in an inflationary environment, you can expect your cost of insurance, no matter who you're with, to go up by at least the cost of inflation almost yearly.
Okay, I understand. So let's change gears and talk about some specialty items now, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I know many parents with teenagers. Why is insurance so high for them?
Well, like we talked about earlier, it depends on who's driving. The insurance company looks at that and says, oh man, 16-year-old kid, A, teenagers are a little bit more impulsive. They don't have the experience behind the wheel. B, they've only been licensed for a short period of time, maybe a month or a year. Again, they just don't have that experience behind the wheel to make the proper decisions. It's a learning curve for them. Statistically, teenagers get in more accidents. Statistically, they cause more damage than more experienced drivers. So as the insurance company looks at that and says, how do we rate this? What do we charge them? They base it on statistics. The fact that teenagers are more likely to have accidents, are more likely to cause claims. And so, it's not unrealistic to have a teenage driver add $40, $50, even $100 a month to an insurance bill, simply for the fact that at one point in time, the insurance company is probably going to pay out a claim. So, and then just so everybody's aware, don't be confused when your teenage girl ends up costing less than your teenage boy. Statistics have shown that teenage boys get in more wrecks.
They're the most expensive drivers.
And I can vouch for that in my own teenage years.
Okay, well, I guess that makes sense, especially considering your earlier explanation about how insurance costs are determined. So what about boats and ATV? Do we really need coverage for those things?
Well, it depends on what you mean by coverage for those things. The state of Utah and most other states, including Idaho, have mandated liability coverage just like they do on cars, for boats and for ATVs. So if you're on the lake, in fact, I've had a few customers give me a call, especially over the holidays. They were on Bear Lake and they got pulled over by the boat cop, and the boat cop demanded proof of insurance for
really?
their boat. And they're saying, I don't have it. And, fortunately, they were nice and they just gave them a ticket. But they can impound your boat right off the water. They
Wow.
can force you off the water. Same thing with your ATV. They can take you right off the trail because you don't have liability coverage. So, yes, you do need coverage for those things. But just like a car, you have choices. You can choose to cover the machine itself. You can choose to cover your passengers. You can choose to cover yourself. There's all kinds of coverage options. And really, it can vary from being very inexpensive just to get the liability protection to be legal, or, a little bit more cost to cover some extra things. I know a lot of these four-wheelers, the Razors and the Rangers, etc., they're getting quite expensive. I looked at one and it cost a whole lot more than any car I'm driving. So, we offer protection for that, and most insurance companies do.
From theft?
From theft, from collision,
Okay.
rolling it down the hill, anything. A lot of people don't think, oh, well, I just store it half the year anyway. Well, if your garage caves in on it, it's not covered unless you have the proper coverage on it.
Wow.
So for a few dollars more, you can protect that investment of yours.
Okay, well, I'm with you now. So what are some things that might be best to not insure?
Well, that's really up to your need. Everybody's different. Everybody has different insurance needs. Obviously, some people have more assets, which means that they have more to lose, and they would probably need to insure more. People fail to realize that the largest cost of insurance isn't actually your vehicle or your house. It's actually the liability that you carry. It's what you could cause injury or damage to someone else. That's where the largest cost comes in. So in an auto accident, people say to me all the time, "Oh, I just drive a little dinky car. Why am I paying so much? It's not even, the car isn't even covered." Well, you could still cause a lot of damage with that car. Suddenly someone's injured and they're needing a surgery or some therapy. It adds up very fast. I mean, you can barely walk in the door of the emergency room without getting up to several $1,000s. So you just want to make sure that you have enough insurance to cover your assets. And that's something that a licensed professional can help you with. Also, things not to insure, it just depends on where you live as well. A lot of people say, do I need flood insurance? Do I need earthquake insurance? Well, one of the reasons why those aren't included on every homeowner's policy is because some areas just don't need them.
Sure.
I mean, it's not very likely to be a victim of the type of flood that would occur that would pay out on on the flood insurance for a homeowner if you live, on a mountaintop. It's just not very likely to happen, so why would you pay for that insurance? However, when you're in the mountains, it may be a little bit more likely that an earthquake could happen and destroy your home. So you may want to look into coverage for that. So again, it comes down to what you need and what your situation is, how many assets you have, where you live, and discussing that with someone who's qualified to do so. I will throw in one note here. A lot of people come to me and they say, "Oh, well, I heard from such and such radio personality, or I read in a book by this guy that I shouldn't pay more than this, or I shouldn't have this type of coverage." And I say, "Well, what's his insurance license number?" Right? "Oh, he doesn't have one." Right, he's not an insurance professional. He doesn't, he might be able to provide a little bit of basic knowledge, but you really need to discuss it with someone who's qualified.
Okay, wow. So this has been amazing. I've got a ton of notes. Thanks so much, Brian.
Yeah.
I think it's so important for someone to work with an insurance professional who actually keeps your goals ahead of everything else. It sounds like that's your focus, and that's what sets you above the crowd because of your knowledge and your experience.
We try.
So focus is important in any profession.
Well, actually, I would agree with you 100%. Look at what you've been able to accomplish. You have a 57-point marketing plan. You usually sell in half the time and for quite a bit more compared to the average realtor. About 4% is, I think, what you told me. I think you do that because it's a focus of yours, and it's a focus that your team has put into place.
Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your time giving us an overview of the insurance and sharing some of the basics. There are so many questions, and I see how you're able to help people create a plan that meets their goals. So 2 important things before we go. Let's give everyone your contact information again, and then we'll talk about the special offer we have. So where can our listeners contact you, Brian?
Well, like I said, like you told us, we have 2 offices that we work out of. One's in Logan and one's actually in Eden. Either phone number you call will reach us. I'd try 801-745-2428. That's our Eden office. Or I'm always available by email, bweller@allstate.com. And of course, we're online as well. Go to brianwellerallstate.com.
Great. Thank you for that, Brian. Now for the special offer. From now through the end of September, anyone who gets a quote from Brian will be given a $10 gift card. Brian, that's an awesome offer, and we already talked about those are free quotes, so thank you very much.
Absolutely. You really have nothing to lose. You get a free quote, and you get $10. But I appreciate your time today. Thanks for letting me come on.
You're welcome, Brian. It's been very educational and well worth the time, as I'm sure our listeners will agree. So as a final note, remember that I'm in the real estate business, so if you know someone who's looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, please consider referring them to me. They can leverage the knowledge I have from personally owning over 170 homes since 2002. Feel free to contact me at 801-695-7787, or Ann, which is ANN, at northernutahhometeam.com. Ann at northernutahhometeam.com. If you want a transcript of this program, just let me know. Again, my number is 801-695-7787 or Ann at northernutahhometeam.com. Until next time, keep living smart.